This was a chart that was in the tax incident study that was published by the Star and Tribune 4 or 5 years ago. This first I've seen of the governor's recommendation, but it just seems to me this is what the governor's talking about. And something we've been aware of in terms of the governor's argument of fair share. And this was data produced during the previous executive's administration. And this is simply a factual matter about who pays and who doesn't pay and what percent. It is absolutely true that the point you made, Madam Chair, that the group on the higher end, even though they pay a less percent of their income, they pay the bulk of taxes. That is absolutely true. But both things can be true at the same time. And that's the only point the governor's making, I believe.
Senator Pogemiller, I have also asked our page to hand out the pages from the Minnesota Taxpayers Association that we talked about before. It has the cover page, and it also has the pages that follow that talked about how and documents how Minnesota's individual income tax is the least regressive. It shows that married joint filers in Minnesota at the top income ranges pay on the U.S. average 111, 116%, up to 122% of the U.S. average in terms of individual income taxes. And you can see by the progression up the income range that it gets more and more progressive.
Absolutely.
So it is a very progressive individual income tax by comparisons. Your point is well taken. I wouldn't dispute this chart at all.
Madam Chair, my only point is several of these things can be true at the same time. And what this chart shows is that if you take property taxes into account and sales taxes into account, total tax burden, this is the bottom line. And I think we all know that the only way to fix this chart is to make the income tax even more based on ability to pay. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. That's the point I think Governor Dayton is making. Whether he's right or not is, obviously people dispute that. But factually, based on data that's been developed by our Department of Revenue under a previous administration, the just previous administration, these are the facts. And I think we should not dispute the facts. We can obviously dispute whether we think our conclusion to the facts is what we want or not. But you can have both the higher incomes paying the most in taxes, which is a fact, and you can also have the higher incomes paying less as a percent of their income, which is also a fact. And that's because if you shift to property taxes, which is the path we're on, I believe that has now taken over in our state as the highest taxation, property taxes. There was a decision made in the 70s to reverse that, and we've lived under that for years. But because we are now in a position where apparently as a policy we've decided to allow property taxes to become the biggest tax source, this is the result. And I note based on the governor's data here today, apparently the 11 projections are worse than this chart. So the trend line is going in the wrong direction.
Well, Senator Pogemiller, I don't mean to be argumentative with you, but I don't think the goal right now for the legislature is to fix a chart. I think the goal is to balance the budget and encourage growth in the economy. And I think it's a wrong focus to say we're going to try and make Minnesota's individual income tax even less regressive when it's actually very regressive. We have much bigger issues, and I'm truly surprised that what we're doing here is $456 million in cuts with all of these revenue increases to pay for them, because it doesn't encourage economic growth and sustainability in the economy.
Sure.
Senator Pogemiller.
A piece of this is the incidence of taxation. I mean, there are two pieces here, what we spend and what we raise. And I'm just stating what I think is obvious. Governor Dayton's position appears to be that one of the tools for balancing the budget under what he considers a balanced approach is to ask those who are paying less a percent of their income than most Minnesotans to pay some more now. Just as a factual matter, that's what he's asking. Whether one agrees with that or not is why we're here. But that's what he's asking. I don't think you should trivialize a notion by a governor to suggest that our tax system should be based on one's ability to pay.
Madam Chair.
Senator Howe first, and then Senator Chamberlain.
Well, I agree that, you know, we are going to drive behavior with this, and it's not just going to be a constant line. But the question is, at what point? Your top your top earners are usually your job creators too. And at some point, you're going to reach that point where you're going to change the behavior. And they have options. And if we take job creators and chase them out of our state, you know, we talk about having a business-friendly climate. And we all know, you know, the way our tax structure is not business-friendly in Minnesota. And you know, we talk about our high corporate tax rate, but we have a much lower effective rate. We need to get to that lower effective rate and reduce some of these exemptions and incentives that we use. So we, you know, on surface, we're just a much better climate to do business. But you know, I'd like to. I think we really need true reform in how we do this, and there's a lot of options out there, but there's a lot of fear, you know, going to like a fair tax system where we charge a rate and people at the lower scale can file for all the tax back. But, you know, the people at the low end of the scale actually benefit from our system, from tax credits and stuff, and they actually get more money back than what they pay in. And the people at the top end don't pay what somebody might say is their fair share because their income is way above, and it screws up all of it. You know, if you're looking at the top 1/10 of 1%, yeah, that's where that decimal point goes down, and it doesn't look like it's progressive. But we're going to change behavior with this, and I don't know if it's the right thing to do at this point where we're sitting in our economy, and that's the question. Do we spiral further downward because of the changes that we're making in this tax? So I think that's just things we need to consider.
Senator Pogemiller, and then Senator Chamberlain.
Senator, I agree with much of what you said, and I think we need the effective rate on the corporate versus the sticker rate. Absolutely. I think there's a general agreement on that. But I think we need to look at how behavior is affected, and I think we have some historical data on that. And in my judgment, this issue that everybody's going to move out of state or they're going to move their business to South Dakota, I believe that's overstated. I believe there certainly are businesses and individuals that will make that decision if we do this. I absolutely think that is true. But you have to look, in my judgment, you have to look at the context overall and make a judgment whether that trade-off is worth it or not in terms of funding your educational system and so forth. So my only point would be is that I believe the argument that, I believe the attack yesterday by some that this proposal by the governor was anti-job and would create no job creation in our state. I just believe that's overstated. And I think the evidence historically in Minnesota is that that is not the case. Not the case. But I do not dispute that individuals or individual businesses make decisions based on this. They absolutely do. But you have to look in the aggregate and see what the net effect is.
Senator Pogemiller, to that point, though, I thought we've been learning that it's also our ability to attract and retain high-skilled labor that's so important in our economy, and this is counterproductive for that. It's going to be very hard to recruit high-skilled engineers and scientists and folks to Minnesota if our income tax is so high and not competitive.
Madam Chair?
Senator Pogemiller.
I dispute that. I believe that's not the historical evidence. I think we were able to recruit during supposed high income tax regimes in Minnesota. Our economy performed much better. And so I think we need to be careful not to overstate some things that seem common sense, but if you look at the data, it's simply not true.
Senator Chamberlain, thank you for your patience.
Briefly, what we're not talking about appropriately so is living within our means. Simply jacking up and taking money from people who invest and create jobs and not addressing the other side is irresponsible, and it's not living within our means. We had to live within our means. We don't have the resources anymore. And just as a final note, Oregon did this, and they lost $50 million. Thank you, Mrs. Chair.